Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the YPOers and friends around the world. I'm Julie Simon, co-chair of the YPO Psychedelic Medicine for Mental Health Group. And for the past 2 years, I have been providing psychedelic integration groups weekly for YPO members. I've dedicated my life to advancing psychedelic-assisted aftercare, not only because of the overwhelming evidence supporting its effectiveness, but also because of my own personal experience. Currently, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Integro, a pre-launch comprehensive digital integration platform focused on achieving lasting behavior change. We combine community, live groups, and precision personalized content, leveraging AI to transform integration and to build the first large-scale validated data model on best practices. I want to express my deepest gratitude to the many YPO members dedicating their time and expertise to the psychedelic assisted care ecosystem and doing the inner work yourselves. Today's session will run for 60 minutes, with a Q&A session following my conversation with our guests today. If you have questions, please submit them via the Q&A feature on your Zoom screen, and we'll address them during the Q&A portion at about 40 minutes after the hour. Please note that the session is being recorded, and all registrants will receive a link to the recording. This is a great reason to sign up for future programs, even if you can't attend live. Today's guests are 1440 Multiversity, Beckley Retreats, and Inscape, all of whom are focused on providing standards of care within the psychedelic medicine space. We will also be joined by a fellow YPOer at the Metro New York chapter who will share how to work within the YPO system. We're incredibly grateful and privileged to be joined today by Scott Kriens, Neil Markey, Alex Enchin, and Peter Corbett. First up is Peter Corbett, fellow YPOer from YPO Metro New York.
Hey, everybody. Julie, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. So
Tell me how have you succeeded at bringing this to your chapter and forum at YPO Metro?
well, I first will say I've been in YPO for 12 years, and I've been in my chapter for 8 and my forum for 7. And so the first way to succeed in this is with patience. My own personal experience is about 28 years of psychedelic work. So I started young, let's put it that way. And it wasn't the right time. For all those years, it wasn't the right time. Our culture was very different 12 years ago. I don't know if anyone's noticed, things have been shifting dramatically with regard to the use of psychedelic medicines of all kinds. So I didn't really propose it officially until I think 6 years ago. I was in a chapter board meeting. I've been on my board now, I think 6 years, forum officer for 3 years, strategy officer for 2 years, finance officer, et cetera. And I said in one of those meetings, hey, we should probably do something at some point in time. And I remember one board member who was about to age out into gold said, there's no way. We can't do this. I'll call the cops. I was like, wow, what a generation gap. And he was only 10 years older than me. So he aged off the board. And then it was this year, this learning year. So for those of you who don't know, our learning years are September to July, essentially. And our budgets renew then. And I said, for this learning year, let's finally do it. And so the learning officer of our chapter and I are in very close cahoots on a lot of things. And she said, great, here's the budget. You figure it out. I trust you implicitly. And so I'll get into the details of the specific event, specifically for the chapter. Julie, is it a good time? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So now you're getting some approval. You had pushback, and now some people are interested.
Yeah.
Now your next step is?
So I knew that we had to work with a legal compound. I also knew that I didn't want people to have to travel. So in New York, our option essentially was ketamine. So there wasn't going to be psilocybin, there wasn't going to be ayahuasca, it wasn't going to be ibogaine or anything else. And so you can use ketamine for ketamine-assisted psychotherapy in the United States. And the key is that you need licensed clinicians. So I reached out to several and I found the right partner locally. And so we had a prescribing psychotherapist vet 16 of our chapter members. We promoted the event to our chapter pro. I'm assuming most people use chapter pro for their chapters. Had a big waiting list. We have 230 people in our chapter. I would say at least 35% of people wanted to engage in what we called executive relief. And for those on the call that are not
Yeah,
aware,
what's executive relief?
executive relief is the language I use to express that we would be having a psychedelic experience for our members. And specifically with the compound ketamine, it is wonderful for mitigating depression. Less effective on anxiety, but certainly has effects on anxiety. It's very much used for depression and very effective for suicidality. So the intake was completely private. Members RSVP'd to a waiting list that was private. So instead of everyone knowing, here's everyone that wants to do this session, no one knew except for myself and the executive director of the chapter. I curated those groups, sent them to the prescribing psychotherapist to vet them for legal use of ketamine, and then give them a prescription that was for one-time use that was specific to them. And then the therapist brought that to our session. That session and all of this, by the way, I wrote a little guide that Julia, I assume you'll want to share with the group after this, so you can see all the details. Steal the copy that I used for this event. So you'll be able to, if you get it past your learning officer and your executive director, you'll be able to do at least a ketamine-assisted psychotherapy program in your chapter. I'm speaking specifically of the United States. We did not have to get approval from international. That's not something that international does. That's not something that they will do. All they said was, just please don't market it publicly. Not like we market YPO events publicly anyway. So maybe they were worried that like our medical provider would say YPO is one of our clients and we provide
Mm.
ketamine for CEOs. Like that would be problematic. So we had our provider, no, not using their name on purpose, sign a non-disclosure and a confidentiality agreement. All of the liability was on that provider because that's their business. They do that all day, every day. I'm a day chair. I happen to be an expert facilitator, executive coach. I've taken people to the jungle for ayahuasca. I can do all that. I just didn't want the liability on me. So that made me feel free to really craft this for my peers and not be concerned about doing so.
So we have a lot of YPO members on the call
Yep.
today watching this, as well as represent lots of forums and chapters. What advice would you give to them if this is something that they're interested in pursuing? Maybe they've never done it before and have no experience. What should they be
Yeah.
looking for?
Yeah. Read the little guide that you'll get after this call that I wrote. It's very short. It's not meant to be all encompassing. And one of the things that it says is like, take this seriously. This is not in any way something we should do casually. I hear people say, oh, like, well, I'll just have my forum retreat and we'll just take a bunch of mushrooms. And I'm like, please don't. Like, let's actually have a ceremonial context if you're introducing people to this for the first time. Many people on this call won't even know what that is because in the United States, at least, like many of us took, mushrooms going to a concert or something in our teens, and we don't know what it's like to have practitioners, to have your own space. Maybe you have a blindfold on, maybe there's live music or a playlist, and you're in your own process. So I say, take it seriously. Um, there's no need to push the legal boundaries in any way, shape, or form. So in the US, as I mentioned, ketamine is especially in any given state going to be useful. If you're in Oregon or California, and I know there's a couple other jurisdictions, you may have an opportunity for psilocybin. I would ask you to do that homework and do that homework with your chapter. And if you're not going to do it in the US, then go to a jurisdiction like Jamaica. I think we'll have Neil speaking to on this call, or somewhere else where that fear and pressure is not a part of the set and setting, which is a phrase you'll hear so much. And then last thing I'll say, I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. The other part of that guide talks about how to do this for a forum. So I was speaking to a chapter-wide program, which we just completed here in New York. The forum part has a whole different dynamic. So I gave you guys the full agenda. I gave you the full budget breakdown on a cost per person basis based on what we spent. And I think you can do this in a very cost-effective way domestically. And I just won't be speaking to any of the black market or gray market areas, unless Julie says, Peter, please tell us.
Well, if we have questions in the Q&A about it, we can address it then. But I
Yeah.
appreciate your time and joining us today to help our, other YPOers understand how to work within this. And I also appreciate, you and our the Y Site group and being able to share that and how much you do deeply care about people going into this medicine and taking it very seriously, and it's not recreational.
Mhm.
So
Thank you.
thanks, Peter.
My pleasure.
See you back at the Q&A. All right, next up, Scott Kriens, one of my favorite people who I got to spend the weekend with at the Set and Setting Conference at 1440 Multiversity. And what you are doing at 1440 Multiversity is just unbelievable in the idea of bringing all these experts together to create a true center of excellence. And you're really not accepting anything less from what I can tell about you. Tell us what is a center of excellence?
Well, first of all, thanks for the invite. It's good to be here with this group, and I first would just echo something Peter said, which is take it. This is how we feel about it too: is take it seriously. Um, you can do it casually, you can do anything for fun, but if it's really about, what I would say, and I think it's one of the things, if I could wave a wand, I would position the whole field of psychedelics a little differently, which is to say, and this is if you're serious, it's about improving your mental well-being, your emotional, relational health. And psychedelics is a tool, one tool. And to us, seriously means doing work that begins before any journey experience with medicine and then continues after and is supported in order to make a change lasting. And so at 1440 at the campus, Multiversity, we have a campus in Scotts Valley. It's in Santa Cruz in California. And we've hosted several sessions where medical professionals and therapists have come together to offer services that that again, the process starts before they get there. It continues after people leave. And if I think about it from a, like, why do it? Maybe to those that are trying to understand whether this is something worth doing or what's the purpose of it. Part of what I spent time on before being as involved in this space with the campus and our philanthropic efforts was in tech in the Valley and being part of building a couple of companies. And one of the things that I learned as the companies got bigger was that I couldn't really do it all with my own two hands. I could only try and help my team do the things that could happen when I wasn't there, which was really, as a company got bigger and it got to be thousands of people in 100 countries, and I couldn't be most all places. And so what I came to believe is that what constituted the quality of leadership was if you were authentic. And that means showing up as who you really are and not who you wish you were or who you hope people will think that you are. And my experience was everybody knew the difference. And so if I were to bring that back to our conversation, why do this work? It's to get more deeply connected to who we are. And then that translates into showing up with a richer, deeper quality in all the relationships in one's life, personal and professional. And so that's why, to me, it's a serious assignment. And that's why it requires at the campus, what we do is, again, we host the medical professionals and the trained therapists, people like Dick Schwartz, for those who might be familiar with the IFS therapy mode, who invented it, that surround the medicine journey itself with the kind of support and probing and sense making to really create a durable gain from the experience.
Now, for those who may know or not know, Scott is the former CEO and chairman now of Juniper Networks. That's a pretty a big CEO role there and a big leadership role within for other YPOers to take a look at. And what would you say your experience is that made you want to pursue this path and offer this to others? Is it, what happened for you?
Well, to be honest with you, it was because I couldn't answer the question of, so who are you? If you need to show up authentically as who you really are for whatever your purpose, to build a higher quality relationship, you have to be able to answer the question. And most of my answers were who I wish I was, or hoped I could be, or hoped someone would see me as, or could manufacture for other people to think I was, or whatever. But I just hadn't spent that much time with myself. There's too many other things to do, and there's people that demand time and stuff that has to happen, and families to build and companies to run and stuff. And so I just hadn't made myself much of a priority. And so the opportunity for the medicine, this is what I wish wasn't so often said about it sometimes, and people here know the difference, but it gets billed as a miracle drug. Like, take this pill and have this breakthrough. And it's not, certainly, I'll just say it's not been my experience. But what it is a tool that cracks one open. If you do it well with proper support, it opens you up to learn some things about yourself, and to ask some questions and maybe see some things and maybe uncover some buried understandings. And maybe, which is one of the things that I think happens often, is to say the person that I thought I was when I stopped asking the question when I was 14 years old doesn't need to be the person that I am today. But we aren't really programmed. We have learning windows that open, or that open sometimes by trauma, confrontation. And then as quickly as possible, we close them up and put them away and move on and never look back. It's hard to open those windows. And in neuroscience, the thing that excites the behavioral scientists and the neurologists and the neurophysiologists about psychedelics is they map the brain and watch it open by virtue of medicine that's taken. And it happens with ketamine. It happens with other medicines. It doesn't stay open as long with all medicines. But I've come to believe that the particular molecule, plant, medicine is not nearly as important as the surroundings of it and the proper setting and the proper support. And you can do a world of good with ketamine. It's safe, it's legal, it's short, manageable acting, open periods. And you can also progress and do other things, other medicines, other molecules, plants that'll be different. But how good it is, or how much difference it makes in one's life, has a lot more to do with the questions you ask and the intention you take and the support that you get doing the work. And that's what at 1440, when we host workshops that come together, what we're trying to curate are the people who take it just as seriously and who have the qualifications to make it safe, to make the impact deep, and to give you as much support as possible to create some lasting, durable benefit that comes from doing the work. Because to do it right is hard. It can be fun. It might not be fun at all, but it's worth it if you do it well.
And Center of Excellence, how is that defined?
Yeah, I guess it's looking for the best examples of the doctors and an experience, and particularly the arc of care around a psychedelic intention begins with how you prepare in the setting for the journey experience itself. How are you held? What music, what therapy, what food as medicine have you had before or after? What guidance do you get for the sense making of all of it, particularly if it's an impactful experience? How do you know you're safe? So when we say Center of Excellence, if this is about getting more connected to oneself, others in your life, in whatever capacity, relationships to have impact have to be intimate. And to be intimate, you have to be vulnerable. And to be vulnerable, it has to be safe. And so what we do in the hosting of these kinds of things and in this curating of the people that we recruit in all dimensions, music, therapy, medicine, food, and so forth, is to look for the best of the best that we can connect with and that we can have in the container, so that you know when you get there that you're going to be safe. You know that if that's true, you can be brave, which is required, I believe, if you're going to learn from this. And that I'm not alone. The group support model of this, which maybe Alex and Neil will talk about, huge difference making thing, in my opinion. You can do this solo, but groups make such a difference. And so you need to have we believe a center of excellence has to have a container that has an understanding of all those dimensions, and creates the maximum possible potential benefit for a participant.
All right. Thanks, Scott. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you who you are.
Well, we don't have time for that. And I'm not sure I know the answer to the question. But I love building things and I love learning things. And I try and bring as much humility to the reality that I often know very little about what is really possible. But if anything, I suppose I'm deeply curious.
All right. Thanks, Scott. We'll see you back at the Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Neil from Beckley Retreats. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Beckley and how it might be different from some of the others who are presenting today.
Sure. I grew up in Maryland, was at University of Maryland studying math. September 11th happened. Long story short, I ended up in the service. Iraq once, Afghanistan twice. I was a captain in the Ranger Regiment, and got out in 2012 and went to Columbia University for grad school. By some measures was doing well professionally, but was actually, struggling quite a bit with that transition. And I cycled through SSRIs, anti-anxiety medications, sleeping pills. Some worked, some didn't. And then the thing that really shifted things for me was I got introduced to meditation. A guy that was doing his PhD there, I think, was one of the first people that saw that I was struggling quite a bit and started going on a lot of long form programs, and then had the fortune of having some professionally facilitated psychedelic experiences in those years. And there's actually a long history of veterans that have been getting access to these experiences in the US on the underground and then internationally. And I learned how to take better care of myself, and went on to be an entrepreneur, was at McKinsey for a bit, and then was doing private equity restructurings for a while, and really was looking to find more meaning. Frankly, at the end of that corporate period, I noticed that some of my symptoms were coming back that I had worked so hard to get rid of coming out of the service. And I was looking around at a lot of my peers, many of whom went to really good schools and came from well-to-do families, and they were having trouble sleeping and they were out of shape and they were struggling. Not as bad as military veterans, but it's a spectrum. And so about 5 years ago, I left and got back to meditation, teaching meditation. And then everything kind of changed when I met this woman, Amanda Fielding. And Amanda Fielding's this incredible human being who has been studying psychedelics for her entire life, 60 years, and started the Beckley Foundation in 1998. And they were really looking at doing the best research in the world and lobbying for international drug policy reform. And her family and the philanthropists around her saw that the world was changing and it was time to start building the infrastructure. And so the teams and the centers and the programs, and it was kind of, for me, right place, right time, just a dream opportunity to work on something I believe so much in. And we're a US public benefit corporation, dual mission to be sustainable, but also to improve access and contribute research. And we have legal operations in the Netherlands and Jamaica, and we run what we would call integrative health programs. So we have a digital preparation, an immersive experience, and then a digital follow-up. And we're really kind of looking at functional medicine in many ways. And so we're teaching meditation, mindful movement, breathwork exercises, some Western psychotherapy tools, all in the prep to get people ready. And then, as Scott mentioned, we were big believers in the group model. It's not for everyone or for everything, but for many people and for many desired outcomes, the group is the better path. And so we really like the group format. And then we have an immersive experience from 3 nights to 5 nights. And they're on beautiful estates. It's an opportunity to do a digital detox. And then we're doing a lot of those practices that we taught in the prep together. And yeah, it's a bit different than you would maybe have in a doctor's office. You know, we try to allow for some of the beauty of the experience. We play live music. I think we have some of the best facilitators in the world. Frankly, we pay really well, and people think Amanda's really amazing and like working with her. So I think that's something we do excellent.
What's the medicine that you provide, and where are you located?
It's mushrooms, and it's about an hour inland from Montego Bay. We have a 2,000-acre horse farm. And then we have 2 properties in the Netherlands that we use that are both about an hour, hour and a half east of Amsterdam. And we're just opening a location in the Middle East that will be public about in the next couple months, which is extraordinary to see a part of that part of the world opening up to it.
And these will all be psilocybin.
These are all, yeah, we use natural psilocybin. We supportive of synthetics, but if we can use natural, we prefer natural. So we actually make a tea. And each individual gets a custom amount, which is a discussion between them and the senior facilitator. So it's tailored, which actually I think is a better approach.
So everything at Beckley Retreats is legal?
Everything's fully legal, above board, we're insured. We find that that's really really important. Scott mentioned this. Not that you can't have these experiences in the more gray kind of areas, but you need to ask more questions. And so for us, we really like being in places where it's like, we're not hiding anything. We know where the mushrooms come from. We chemically test them. We have our facilitators test. Everything's above board, which is something that we're really proud of and, think is important.
And what is your advice to YPO members or chapters and forums when looking for something?
Well, it's been mentioned, but I would take it seriously. It's there's something very significant here, very significant. 88% of our guests say it was either the most meaningful or one of the most meaningful experiences of their life. And so it should be done with some reverence and some respect. And yeah, I think you want to, understand the facilitators, what's their background. I think you want to, the setting, the location's really important. Are they teaching you skills around the experience? Which I actually think's one of the, maybe not most important, but one of the big benefits of these is this neuroplasticity that Scott mentioned. So there's this openness. And I think for many people, if they had the experience on their own, they go back to their old ways of life, they don't make any habit change, you're going to revert back to your old ways because there's a lot of momentum there by the time you get to be middle-aged. So if you look for a program where they're going to teach you some better ways to live and take better care of yourselves, I think you're going to have longer, more durable outcomes.
All right, great. Thanks, Neil. Anything else you want to leave us with before we move on to Alex?
Well, it's really nice to be able to do this. I feel like I'm friends with Alex and Scott, so it's kind of cool to be on a panel together. And we're actually hoping to be able to do a collab at 1440, so there might be a chance for a Beckley 1440 program this year. It's exciting.
Oh yeah, that sounds very cool. Thanks for that update, Neil. All right, let's go to Alex and everybody. If you go to the Q&A, you can upvote things if there's something that you like within the Q&A so that we can make sure that we get to those questions first. Alex, you are on mute, so I'm just going to make sure you unmute. Perfect. All right, so tell us about yourself and what Inscape is.
Sure. Thanks, Julie, for having me and for organizing this, and to Britt as well. I'm Alex Enchin. I'm from Toronto, Canada originally, live in Los Angeles. And my story of how I got into this is really about my mother. So my mom has been very unwell with mental health challenges for about 12 or 13 years at this point. And I really immersed myself in looking for help from my mom back in Canada, and was particularly struck by the total inadequacy of the mental health system, and specifically antidepressants and conventional talk therapy. And I really set out on a quest to see what other tools are available. And I moved to California, and I started noticing pretty much everywhere I went in 2017, somebody was talking about plant medicine or psychedelics. And I got super curious. Why is everybody suddenly talking about this? I found Michael Pollan's book in 2018, and I could just feel in reading How to Change Your Mind that there was something there that I needed to explore myself. And at the end of 2018, I had my first psychedelic experience with psilocybin, and that was in Canada. And just for sake of time, I would say that what that experience offered me that was incredibly unique and kind of redirected my life was I felt as though it allowed me to look at my own internal software code and to actually look at how I was encoded, especially with some early childhood experiences, and then have an opportunity to make revisions to that code with the support of this psychotherapist. And I just felt like what I had stumbled onto was incredibly meaningful and was going to change tens of millions of people's lives. And I knew I wanted to be involved in helping people get access to it in a very high level way. So I spent a few years building a retreat center in Costa Rica and a YPO forum from the Santa Monica chapter. I did see one member of that forum on the call earlier, but they asked me to set up an ayahuasca retreat for their forum, for eight of them, all men. I set that up for them about a year and a half ago in Costa Rica. And at the end of that retreat, one of the members of the forum said to me, I've been to retreats like this before, but not at this level. Could you create an experience like this for groups like us in different places? I haven't seen anybody who takes kind of like a concierge medicine approach to psychedelic therapy. And he said, you feel like the right person to do that. And so I've been doing that for the last about 16 months, running this business called Inscape, which you could think of as a concierge psychedelic advisory. We work with YPO members. I had a YPO member at a retreat last week, some Tiger 21 folks as well. And the essence of Inscape is like, how do you get access to the best care, the best psychedelic experiences and practitioners in the world? What does that even mean for someone to be, among the best practitioners in the world? And I work with only about 6 practitioners at this point, all of which I've worked with myself over the years. I've done a fair amount of exploring the world of psychedelic medicine. And basically, I've worked with a small group of people, of practitioners. Some are therapists, some are executive coaches. One is a Chinese medicine doctor. One has a background in social kind of entrepreneurship. And basically, I've identified a very small group of people who are playing a different game than the field of psychedelics. And I can get into and elaborate a little bit more about that as well. But we run mostly private retreats for families or couples or forums or groups of friends. And then once or twice a year, we run invitation-only retreats that individuals can actually come to. We're typically, a few of you guys have mentioned the advantages of the group work, which I definitely echo. And the thing that we've built into our programming is you may be coming to a group retreat, which might be with your family or your forum, but everybody's going to be doing one-on-one coaching before and after the retreat. And I feel like the group experience is so rich and fruitful, but a one-on-one coaching relationship with a therapist, which would be therapy, or an executive coach, just offers something a bit different. And that's just philosophically something that I really believe in and have built into the programs that we run. I thought it was interesting, after that forum retreat that I ran, that in every other area of medicine, it's fairly simple to discern who are the top people in this field or in this specialty. And if you have the resources and the connections, you can pay the money and go see Peter Attia or go have your microbiome checked by Mark Hyman. But I didn't see anybody applying that methodology to psychedelics. And so that's what I'm doing, and that's what we're doing at Inscape. And the programs that we run are custom. They're obviously predominantly private. And I just didn't see anybody who could create, a custom experience in nature. I think nature is like absolutely fundamental and critical to getting the most out of working with psychedelics. And I'm sure, Julie, you're about to ask this question, but we essentially help organize retreats with every medicine except for ketamine and except for ibogaine. So those are the two that sort of we don't participate in, but everything else in between, and some that many of you have probably never heard of, are fair game, and we can help kind of organize those. To me, one of the things that is so critical is like the therapeutic alliance. And I think what people can get out of a psychedelic experience, individually or in a group, happens as a result of an alliance that's formed between the facilitator or the therapist and the individual participant. And so one of the things that I've been doing sort of unintentionally is advising people on. I had a YPO member from Aspen a few months ago get in touch who had a curiosity to join. I think it was a YPO ayahuasca trip to Peru out of the Middle East. And he said to me, like, what do you think about me doing this? Am I going to be okay? And I said, well, I don't really know very much about you, so I can't speak to that, but ayahuasca is largely safe, provided you're not on serotonergic kind of antidepressants and a couple other things. And after chatting with him, I sort of said to him, if you haven't done any of this work before, if you haven't experienced psilocybin or MDMA in a therapeutic context, this is kind of like you going to run a marathon without ever having run 3 miles, and that there are other kind of more palatable beginner steps to take here. So I do a bunch of this, I would call it advisory work with CEOs and leaders around how to access psychedelics in a smart way. And very happy to be of service to this community if anyone's looking for that kind of guidance. And what else did I want to mention? Yeah, I love this work. It's really changed my life. And I've witnessed as recently as last weekend, hosting a group of 5, people's lives being redirected and reoriented, and to echo some of what Scott shared, like people really getting in touch with who they really are at a much deeper level. And I just really believe in this work, and I'm, honored and grateful to get to be a part of it.
Great. And something Alex said, we're going to have another YPO webinar where we go over all of the different psychedelic compounds so that everybody is aware of what they are, and any questions around that. Okay, so now we are coming to our Q&A portion, and let's see what we have here. The first question is, my forum recently decided as a group to include psychedelic work with experienced guides in our upcoming retreat. Since we made that decision, 2 members have made personal health-related decisions not to participate in the psychedelic journey work, but will attend the retreat and have asked the group not to change the overall plan. Would you recommend any practices for our group to ensure that everyone feels comfortable and included throughout? This is very interesting because I can't imagine why 2 people would not be on medicine with the others on medicine, but I'm interested to hear from our panelists.
Happy to jump in. So the little guide that will get sent over to you guys, the forum retreat experience that's referenced in there, there was one person in this same context. They just weren't ready. And so I said, look, there's absolutely no pressure. You do not in any way, shape, or form have to take a psychedelic. That would be abusive, if not illegal or coercive, all the bad things. And I said, but you must be in ceremony the entire time. And they're like, well, I don't even know what that means. Of course, this is their first time. They don't know what being in ceremony means. And so, well, that means that for about 6 to 8 hours, you'll be sitting in a room quietly, likely meditating and journaling, and being with your fellow brothers and sisters who will be engaging in very deep work. And just by being in that space, it will have a huge impact on you. And it did. A lot of people don't, maybe never get an opportunity to serve in a ceremonial context, to serve as support. So this person just all of a sudden realized, like, oh, the facilitators, they need lunch. Got up, made sure they got food. All of a sudden, we're no longer selfish, looking for what we need. We're helping everybody else. So I think it's really wonderful to have our fellow forum members, if they're not ready, but to be in the experience itself, in the ceremony itself. I will add one last thing, and I won't go too long. We did make sure to include holotropic breath work over the course of the weekend. So for those of you who don't know what that is, that's a rapid circular breathing pattern that was pioneered in order to essentially trigger a psychedelic-like experience without any compounds. So this person also had a very cathartic emotional release without having to have ingested any compounds. That made sure that the retreat itself still provided a breakthrough experience for them. So I think there's a lot of ways that you can go about this, but that would be my take.
Neil, what about you? Would you have somebody come who was not participating?
It's always a case by case decision for us. We have had couples come where one of the partners for some medical reasons couldn't, but wanted to participate. And I agree with everything Peter said. Can you have a consciousness expanding experience that everyone can participate in at some point during the week, like a breathwork exercise? And then I really like the idea of, being in the space, but in meditation and in service. It's just really on the facilitators to kind of make sure that the boundaries are clear and that the space is set correctly. But I think it's fine so long as all the parties are okay with that.
All right, here's the next question, and this is a great one. What should we be looking for to find the best experience for our groups? How would anyone know if a facility or program is not good or right for them? Because it seems like everybody's saying how great their program or facility is. You don't really hear any negative results. So how do you know if something is good?
I would recommend talking to people who have been, like who've had that experience, getting a firsthand testimonial, and also just really tuning into your own internal GPS and how you feel in talking to whoever's representing, X and Y retreat center or facilitator, to really like trust your own compass.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's just some good questions you can ask too, like how long you've been in business, how many guests have come through, how do you track feedback, how are you preparing guests, how are you following up with them, what are your safety standards? Yeah, but I think Alex is right. I would get someone on the phone from the organization and feel it out and say, does this feel right? Because I think that's ultimately what's really important.
Yep. Just like everything in YPO, we turn to each other, it seems. We ask fellow YPOers their recommendations for what hotel they like to stay in Paris. We know. So there's a big group that Julie and I are in. There's probably 400 of us now. If we don't know, someone in there knows. So happy to be of service in that way to give recommendations.
All right, here's our next question. I find it hard to believe that all 8 to 10 people in a forum are going to be at the place to be called to do the work. This can be a situation akin to opening a can of worms or Pandora's box. I'm very concerned about the structure of forum and the group think, creating a situation where people choose to do medicine and regret it afterwards. I much prefer it as a chapter choice or YPO choice, or simply going with a close friend to a reputable program. Lots of my personal stuff in here, but having had a 3 to 4 month dark night of the soul situation, even with integration, I feel it's important to protect people. Beginner steps, as Alex mentioned, for sure, especially breath work, since it can be adjusted by the person themselves. I don't know if there's a question here as much as there is.
I think the word that stood out to me in that statement question was the word personal. This is a deeply personal decision and choice, and should not be made as a group think kind of model. And I don't know if this is controversial to my other speakers, but there's a lot of terrible psychedelic work happening in the field. There's a lot of unsafe psychedelic work, and there's a lot of mediocre psychedelic therapy happening out there. So I'm always troubled when I see, very successful, well-resourced people working with some person in the Bay Area that had an MDMA session 5 years ago and decided they wanted to do this for others on someone else's, recommendation. So it's so critical, as Peter was talking about a minute ago, that there's real vetting and that you actually know the right questions to ask or turn to, anyone on this call to like help you ascertain, is this a really high quality experience? I'm kind of spoiled, but I don't think you want to do this unless you can access super high caliber psychedelic work.
I'm going to chime in real quick. I was forum officer for 3 years for YPO Metro, one of the biggest chapters in the world. And so I hold forum incredibly sacred as well. And it is not to be fucked with unless you really know what you're doing. And so that's why I waited so long to, in fact, even be willing to do this for a forum last year. And they were ready. As you say, like it's how rare it would be or how hard to believe. So yeah, it's rare. And it should be rare, in fact. This forum, if you look at forum health surveys, which all of us hopefully do every year, this is my forum officer speaking, should not do this if they're not at least a 9 or above. If you've got like dysfunctional forum dynamics, do not do any of this. Please, please do not do it. Only do it if you're one of the most highly functional forums out there. This is not for fixing your forum dynamics. Let me put it that way.
That's a good point, Peter. Next question. Who shouldn't be doing this work? What happens when someone has a bad experience?
Anyone want to jump in?
I think, well, first of all, a couple of things that completely echo what was said otherwise. For me, some of the most powerful insights I've taken away from psychedelic experiences were from the experiences other people had and shared. So it isn't, when we're designing a program, a YPO program with a guy named Christian de la Huerta, who's one of the premier breathwork people in the world. And breathwork is a complement to the medicine work. And it isn't, this is more to the framing that I mentioned earlier, which is, I think if it's framed as an opportunity to learn and grow amongst if it is going to be group work, a community of people who care about you, it isn't about, it isn't even about having to take the medicine. Every workshop we've ever had, one of the things that the practitioners do is check in with who wants to do this on that day at that time. And it's kind of the first test of, are you really getting to your true self? Are you able and willing, and is the group supporting you if you say, you know what, I just don't feel right about it today. It's not for me on this day. And does that mean I'm going to be judged and so forth? No, in the right setting. But that's what makes the setting so important. And there's no guarantee that somebody doesn't have what I would call a difficult experience. But difficult is different than bad. You can have very challenging experiences, and pick a large enough number of people, more than one person will have an experience which is difficult. But with the right preparation, with the right professionals, with the right support, and with the care that comes from the community that holds you, many times, I don't want to make a generalization, but many times, those people who have had the most difficult experiences under the altered state of the medicine have had the most powerful and most beneficial outcomes. So difficult is different than bad.
I would just add to what Scott said that perhaps a better duality to think of it as is actually safe and unsafe trip, not good trip or bad trip. And if you have real trauma in your life, as many of us do, some capital T trauma, some lowercase t, if you're re-experiencing the difficult experiences of your life, that's probably not going to be fun or rainbows and unicorns, but a lot of the therapeutic benefit comes from working through some of the difficult content. So the safe, unsafe framework is perhaps more apt than good or bad.
Yeah, and one thing I would also add from what was asked earlier about how do you know if it's a good place or a bad place? One thing I would ask is, what are you offering me? And if what they focus on is, I'm offering you this plant and this medicine experience, that would be my first yellow flag. As opposed to someone saying, I'm offering you the opportunity to explore things in your life that you might like to revisit and reframe in a different and healthier way. And by the way, one of the ways we do that is this. How somebody starts and answers that question of why they are inviting you to be part of it is kind of the first tell.
Beautifully said. I will say another way it's a bad place. I was offered a timeshare after my first ayahuasca ceremony the night prior. I was offered $10,000 stem cell treatment after ceremony 2. So are you trying to put me into a vulnerable state and then like sucked the money out of my wallet. So there's not some good places. And by the way, that was an unsafe retreat facility, which I won't say the name here. And having an unsafe experience, at least for me, is also good. I needed to be able to see that. I needed to trust my discernment. I needed to realize no matter what, ultimately, I'm safe, that I can handle this, even if there's this going on. I'm not suggesting put yourself into an unsafe context. So thank you.
I think what you're saying, Peter, is that there's all different types of safe containers. And there's also, especially for those in YPO, financially safe containers. It's not just, are you emotionally safe? Are you physically safe? It's also, are you financially safe?
Yeah. Are you being exploited in some way?
Ethically, yeah.
And also for an individual this was said earlier, Alex said this, and just want to amplify it. This, yes, it can be and very powerfully be a group experience, and it's an incredibly bespoke, personal, individual assessment and evaluation and decision as to what role anyone plays. And any host needs to honor that impeccably and create the comfort for somebody to participate, if at all, in the way of their choosing, and not somebody else's definition of what to do, why, and how.
All right.
Julie, I just realized we didn't really answer the question about who is this not right for, did we?
No, we did not answer that.
Can I give a 10-second, which is...
Yeah, who is it not right for?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are definitely personality disorders that psychedelics are a really bad fit for, including narcissistic personality disorder, certainly borderline. And then certainly there are, with the exception of ketamine, which is typically very safe with other psychiatric medications, for the classical psychedelics, lots of different antidepressants and other medications, some anti-epileptic drugs would be preclude people from participating in psychedelics. I'm sure everyone here has a psychopharmacological, expert or advisor who weighs in on some of these matters, at making sure everyone's, safe that is going to be participating.
Yeah, there's that psychopharmacological point that Alex makes, really true. And then if somebody, I would say, take the time and the trouble to get educated on what this is about, so that it's not an uninformed assessment. But if one does that, and with advice and help, and as Peter mentioned, and especially in YPO, there's so many people to go to and have trusted feedback. And even if the psychopharmacological point is addressed, it's not right for anybody that thinks it's not right for them. So retain your ultimate authority over your own self. And if this doesn't feel right, then stand up and practice the discernment of saying that. Don't follow the herd into this unless you feel prepared, even if you pass the medical screening and everything else. And it doesn't mean that you'll jump into it without trepidation. But be ready.
I also want to say we did get some advice on personality disorders, but I do want to say, please don't listen to your own medical professional. You may have been misdiagnosed. You could be labeled in a wrong way, and then you identify as something's wrong with you your whole life. And then you heard from here, you can't do it because you've got that label. And I want to make sure that nobody is taking advice on what they should or shouldn't do from this panel as well, but that this is your choice and that you make the decision for yourself and with the guidance of a professional. Would you be able to tell us more about the landscape in Europe? It still feels like use of psychedelics for mental health is very much in a gray area. Is Netherlands the only place where we can have a psychedelic experience? Neil, could you speak to that?
Yes, things are changing. I just actually spoke with someone yesterday. They was saying the Czech Republic looks like it's making some progress towards some legalization. But yes, as far as I know, the Netherlands is the only place right now where you can have a experience, and it's actually, instead of with mushrooms, it's with truffles because of the way the law is written. What's interesting there, though, is it is legal for us to offer programs for non-clinical indications. It actually gets a little bit more gray if you want to go get treatment for treatment-resistant depression or something there. So you need to ask more questions around that. But for well people that want to have experience for personal professional development, the Netherlands is the only spot in Europe right now.
Appreciate Scott's commentary. How could my form access 1440 Multiversity to host a retreat? What might that look like? Has 1440 hosted YPO retreats?
We've hosted several YPO events and hosted several psychedelic retreats, but not yet a YPO psychedelic retreat. We had designed one with the chapter in Montreal that we haven't implemented yet at this point, but we do two different types of things. One, we have these workshops, sessions that have ketamine assisted therapy as a part of them. We have one coming up in May that's open to the public. So you could just come on your own. But as a YPO event, I would just take the blueprint for the one that we're going to run and repeat it. And it's a private event that we only make available, really following, this is me not speaking from the YPO point of view, but just understanding how we set this one up for Montreal is to follow the format of YPO and keep it contained to the group. We've designed actually an incredible collection of practitioners, musicians, therapists, doctors, and so it's basically the template is on the shelf. We just need to figure out who and how many and when, and fit it into our schedule there. And we've done several, actually quite a few of these. So it's an easy enough thing to do, but just we have one that's been shaped around YPO specifically. So I would just pull that off the shelf and use it.
You just need Julie and Peter to co-chair it for you and just have the crowd come on by.
That would do it.
All right, it's a very special place in the middle of the redwood forest. It's hard to beat to see that. How old is that mother tree on your property, by the way?
The redwood forest that surrounds the campus is 1,200 years old, and
Wow.
it's 30 minutes from the San Jose airport and kind of in the middle of Silicon Valley. So it's a really unusual combination of circumstance that created the opportunity. And it wasn't really designed. It was built and opened now 8 years ago. It wasn't really designed for psychedelic work, or what I'll call, but what it was designed for is deep relationship development work. We teach leadership there. We do healthcare forums for doctors and nurses dealing with burnout and stress and trauma and so forth. And so it's kind of some force larger than us has pointed us to this work and said, hey, this is more mental, emotional, social, relational health work that happens to now have a tool that is incredibly powerful in opening the window to make gains doing that work if done right. So it fits quite well into our whole care model.
So there's another question about you have a ketamine workshop in May, Scott. I'm going to provide everybody on this call additional ways to get in touch with those who are on the panel so that if you are interested in upcoming things you saw on their website or you would like to work with anybody here on the panel, I will provide that information in the follow-up.
Thank you, Julie.
We are 3 minutes after, and I see we had a lot more questions, and so we didn't get to everything, but
That's what the rest of our lives are for.
that's what the... All right, thank you everybody for coming, and I look forward to seeing you at the next event. And as you know, we do these once a month for the rest of the year to make sure that everybody has as much education about the psychedelic ecosystem for yourselves, your family, your organizations and your chapters and forums. You're welcome to join us at YPO Connect at the Psychedelic Medicine for Mental Health group, as well as our Signal group, Y-Psych Network. So I hope to see you all there. And thank you to our guests, Alex Enchin, Scott Kriens, Peter Corbett, and Neil Markey.
Thanks, Julie. Thank
Here,
you,
guys.
guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Yeah, Julie, thanks everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.